Welcome to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
All right, welcome to another episode of the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com on a very exciting day on my side of the Red River. I work in Fargo at the Forum. I love the state of North Dakota. There are many, many things to love about the state of North Dakota. Politics, for me personally, is not one of them, the state's politics, but I love the people. I love the state. It's the only place I can actually catch walleyes on my own. It's Devil's Lake, North Dakota. So I love North Dakota. But I'm a Minnesota resident, lifelong Minnesotan, as most of you know. And today, this morning, Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris announced that she had selected Tim Walz, the Democratic governor of Minnesota, to be her running mate to face off against Donald Trump and J.D. Couch Vance in November. And the state of Minnesota, at least the Democrats in Minnesota, including myself, are extremely excited because one of our guys, is going to be on the national ticket with, as it stands now, a toss-up chance, a 50-50 chance of being the vice president. I want somebody who knows what they're actually talking about to break this down for me today. And so I reached out to our friend Heidi Heitkamp, former United States Senator from North Dakota, currently at the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago in beautiful Chicago, Illinois. So Heidi, thank you. Thanks for coming on. It's good to see you.
Well, it's great to be on with you, Mike. And I think if you've been kind of watching the national media, Tim called me probably about over a week ago and said that he was getting lots of requests because there was some buzz starting, and would I be willing to talk about him, talk about, my impressions of him. And, I love Tim Walz. And I said, absolutely. And it just has spiraled since then. And, he was the dark horse. And when we started telling our contacts at NBC and ABC and anyone who'd listen that this is a real deal guy, they were like, yeah, but. Well, yeah, but he is the nominee.
Here we are. So when those phone calls came, what did you tell the people who were asking you about Tim Walz? What was your pitch for him?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I said is that, like any good leader, she needs to find people who don't have her life experience. And I know we get criticized a lot for talking about diversity, but diversity for me means get people from all different kinds of walks of life to come into the discussion. They bring a different perspective. It's not about race. It's not about gender. It's about diversity. It's about a collection of thoughts. And I said, there's no one who has a more contrasting kind of personal upbringing and history than Tim Walz. I mean, when you think about her in comparison, or him in comparison to Kamala, who I actually know pretty well. I've known her since she was AG in the state of California. And I think just talk about the complementary kind of attitude, and then talk about the similarities in terms of their idea of what we needed to do to help American families. Talked a lot about, paid family leave, which it just is fingernails on a chalkboard to me when people say that's a progressive idea. And I want to say, is workers' comp a progressive idea? Is unemployment? This is about economics and getting people back in the workforce, getting people comfortable having families. I talked about what he's done for daycare, what he's done for working families and affordability of college tuition, and yes, on choice, and that he has been somebody who has always defended a woman's right to choose. But I said, the thing that you need to know about him is I said, the minute you meet Tim Walz, if you come from my part of the country, you go, I know that guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, right? I know that guy. That guy was my high school, football coach, my high school geography teacher. That guy is somebody I know. And it's not phony. It's not fake. It's authentic. And the other thing I said is, he's a happy guy. You've got J.D. Vance, who is out there the sky is falling, the world is horrible, there's a dark cloud following us around, and it's going to swoop up like Voldemort and carry us all away. And then you guys, well, really, I mean, don't you think it's just?
I'm impressed by the Harry Potter reference. So congratulations, I'm impressed by that.
Well, I could maybe go Sauron, or go the other way, but some dark force out there. Anyway, and then you've got Tim Walz, who sees the exact same challenges and says, what are we going to do about it? And who do I need to bring to the table to solve that problem? So I talked about, from a red state in Minnesota, where he learned to work across the aisle, to deliverables in Minnesota. But at the end of the day, what the American people want is somebody that they know, that they think is authentic, isn't phony. And there's nothing phony about Tim Walz.
It's the old political test that we all come up with in this part of the country is, would you have a beer with this guy? Would you enjoy having a beer with this guy? And I think whether you, and he is an unpopular guy in rural Minnesota. I am from this area. I spend, sadly, probably plenty of time in small town bars having a pizza and a cold beer. But Tim Walz is an unpopular guy out there. But I guarantee you that those guys sitting in the 50 Lakes Municipal or the bar down by Lake Eunice, they'd enjoy having a beer with them because he would sit down and talk with them and have a discussion and have some fun with them.
Well, the other thing that I've been telling people when they say, well, rural America is lost and gone for Democrats, I said, there are so many Democrats out there who want to be seen in rural America, who have given up. And kind of, I mean, you see it, Mike. Mm-hmm. You see a table where everybody's sitting around and they're, bashing on this and they're talking about Trump. And then there's some people who are just quiet. They aren't talking, but they're voting. And to me, is he going to win rural America for the Harris ticket? No, he is not. Could he help her do 5-10% better? Yep, he could. And that's really, it's at that margin that I think makes a huge difference in Wisconsin, in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and even to some degree Arizona. The other thing, and I don't think this has been talked enough about nationally, is he has a Native American woman who is his lieutenant governor. And if he's fortunate enough, she'll be the first Native American woman to serve as governor of one of our states. Yep. And I said, don't think that doesn't matter in Arizona where you're talking to the Navajo, that he has elevated everybody. It matters. And so I think it's going to be interesting. The Republican talking points about Tim Walz are all base plays. I mean, they're playing to the anger and the frustration of their base. They're going to pick up one vote with that message. And to my favorite argument that has been advanced against Tim Walz is that he gave felons the right to vote in Minnesota, to which I said, I don't know. How can you say that given you got a felon on the ticket? I mean,
Donald Trump could vote in Minnesota if he was a resident. Exactly. Exactly.
You don't even see it. They don't see the irony of any of that. But you know Tim, and I know Tim, and I think once the American public gets to know Tim, it'll go beyond kind of the viral moment of calling people, the Trump campaign weird, and it will go to, man, this is a guy who actually delivered paid family leave, who understands the unique challenges of working families.
Were you surprised that he was the choice? It sounds like it was down to Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, and Governor Walz, Minnesota. When the news came out today, or whenever you found out, you're more plugged in than most of us, so you might have known before everybody else.
But no, I mean, I watched the, in politics, everything's about momentum. And 10 days ago, or whenever, I can't even remember when I first did the first interview, I think it was with the New York Times. And people were like, who is she talking about? Who is this person? And you just saw the momentum building, and you saw him I mean, I wouldn't want to use the word auditioning, but you saw him out in, going on Fox News, and you saw him on national television, and you saw the charm. One of the quotes that I had for him that didn't get picked up is I said, people talk about Minnesota nice, but he's got Minnesota charm. He's just, I mean, seriously, he's just, you watch him and you go, I know that guy. That guy's like, and then you put on top of that the National Guard and football coach. And, I just learned today that one of his football teams won a state championship.
Yes.
That means a lot to us. That means a lot to us out in rural America. But,
sure.
I think it's the comfort and the authenticity that she saw. Plus, if you're going to talk about the need to have diverse voices in leadership, how could you not consider Tim Walz?
One of the things I like most about Walz, aside from all the policy wins he's had in Minnesota, and we can touch more on that in a moment, as well as some of the things that the Republicans are going to come at him with. But one of the things I like about him using the weird thing, right?
Yeah.
Is, and however long that lasts, and whether or not that's a long-term thing, is that he put Democrats on the offensive.
Yeah.
And it feels to me like for 8 years, Democrats have been on the defense, trying to fend off the loudmouths on the right and trying to, when Trump is saying something dumb or saying something offensive, or Kristi Noem is saying something dumb or saying something offensive, Democrats just kind of go, whoa. Now it's Democrats saying, you know what? Screw you. You guys are weird. You guys are this. Democrats are controlling the narrative now. And I think that's important. I think it's important to show, you know what? We're not a bunch of wilting lilies that are in our corner, scared over here. Up yours. We can beat you. We can punch in the throat too.
Well, the thing that I've said about weird, because I've been challenged on national television about, you say you want to lower the temperature, blah, 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 and, but yet isn't that a mean thing to say? I want to say, man, compared to what the other guy has said about people, it's mild. But I said, do you think it's normal to talk about Hannibal Lecter? Don't you think that's a little weird? And I said that the reason why weird stuck is Democrats have over-intellectualized Donald Trump. Is he a narcissist? Is he a frontal lobe dementia? Blah, blah. We're all blah, 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 blahing about, psychoanalyzing, him. And in one word, you kind of sum it up. It's just a little weird talking about sharks and, electric boats, electrocuting you. And I mean, and here's a guy, if you talk about electric boats, who's never been on a boat, obviously, and seen a battery. I mean, and I said today, I was on television and I said, look, Tim Walz knows how to get in a fishing boat.
He can catch a walleye. I've seen him catch a walleye.
I said he knows how to get in a fishing boat. And he knows how to hunt, and he knows the game of football, and he knows his people. Now, are people, like you said, I've heard from some Minnesotans who say lots of spending, not really comfortable with that. But the thing is, the one thing that we haven't talked about, Mike, is the tuition waiver. Mm-hmm. So here and the work on technical colleges. And trying to figure out what am I going to do to give everybody an opportunity. Think of how the tuition waiver for Minnesota state schools has affected North Dakota. Mm-hmm. North Dakota is scrambling, trying to figure out how they're going to be competitive in that world. And so it's just so interesting to me that the media, including people that you would think are right or left-wing media, try and paint things like paid family leave and daycare assistance as progressive. I want to say, you know what? Why don't you poll it? It's going to poll 80%. I mean, and it's going to poll just as favorably among a lot of Republicans as it will among Democrats.
Well, and I think that's I think Jake Tapper tried to pin down Governor Walz on that one time and say, he listed off a bunch of things like paid family leave and free college tuition and feeding kids lunch in school to make sure they had a full belly. And Jake Tapper said, "How do you respond, Governor, to the idea that is, progressive liberal ideas and how is that going to play nationally. And Walz said, you know what? If you want to tag me as a governor who fed school children, I'll take that. I'll take that nickname. That's fine with me. And that's what I like, is that he's embracing it. This is who we are as Democrats. This is what we do.
And people want to say, well, what about this and what about that? And I say, you know what? At the end of the day, as euphoric as you and I are today, which I have to say, I'm feeling pretty good, just because I think it was the right choice and it'll energize certain segments of rural America. At the end of the day, this race is going to be between Kamala and the former President Trump. And Walz will be out there doing what he needs to do to help, and so will J.D. Vance. But, the contrast could not be more stark. Now, you can say, we need to go with the old guy who wants to take us back to the 1950s, so we're comfortable in that world, or we're going to go with in a new direction in this country. And in politics, I will tell you, I will always pick the campaign that is future looking, because campaigns aren't about today, they're about the future. And that the interesting thing for me is the contrast, and it's not just woman versus man, or biracial versus white. It is the contrast in joy, right? Donald Trump looks pissed. Every time he's on the stage, he's not having the fun that he had even 4 years ago. He just doesn't have that bounce in his step, and you see it in I'm saying that he's not going to get a lot of votes in our part of the world, Mike, but you see it in the lack of flags and boats with his. I live on the Missouri River, and I always take, what does that look like? Back in 4 years ago, every other boat would have been flying a Trump flag. Yep. Now you see it maybe one every 20. Yep. The enthusiasm isn't what it once was.
And I've seen the same thing I shared with your brother this morning when I was talking to him, Joel. I make the trip between Moorhead and Brainerd quite a bit because I have sisters that live over there. And in 16 and in 20, you drive from Moorhead to Emily, Minnesota, and it was, like you said, every other house on Highway 10 and on the back roads in Crow Wing County, Minnesota, which is a very conservative place. It was all Trump, 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 Trump. I've been out there about 3-4 times this summer, and I have seen just a handful of Trump stuff, the flags, the stickers, and they're still going to vote for him. But it's just not the same. And you're right. The enthusiasm gap is, if there is one, is closed.
Well, in 2016, I was one of the few people who thought in the Senate who thought Donald Trump could win. And they kept saying, why? I said, because I drove around rural Pennsylvania. I went to a wedding in Western Pennsylvania, and the only Hillary sign I saw was Hillary for prison. And every other house had seriously, and every other house had a Trump sign on it. And then I said, then I came home and drove through Western Minnesota doing some campaigning for Colin, and I said, we are in big trouble. Because this swing district, conservative but swing district in Western Minnesota is turning in a way. Mike, I used to say, if I could have 30 miles into Minnesota, I could be elected anything in North Dakota. Just give me that 30 miles, right? Give me East Grand Forks and Moorhead and rural, sugar beet country. I don't know that that's true anymore. That's how much it's turned, but I don't think it is. And here's the good news to your listeners who say, how will this end? Trump lost in 2020. Trump really screwed the Republicans in 2022 by picking candidates who couldn't win, plus by picking Supreme Court justices that reversed Roe v. Wade. And so it was the combination of bad candidates along with choice that led to the victory in 2022. He loses in 2024. There has to be a coming home moment for the Republican Party to recalibrate. And what will happen to the capitulators and the people like John Hoeven and Doug Burgum and, you name your person in Minnesota, What happens to them, I don't know. Whether they just breathe a sigh of relief and go on with their life, or if they double down on a MAGA agenda. If they double down on a MAGA agenda, I think that the Democrats only have, bright sunshine ahead of them.
Is that a winning campaign message? I've had that discussion with other people talking politics. Can the Democrats make the case to America that if we beat Trump at the ballot box this year, we're done with him? He's done.
Yeah, it's a complicated message, right? Because every election is about this election, not the next one.
Okay.
And anytime that you try and say, well, you need to vote for me because I'll be a buffer, that right away that gets too complicated.
Okay.
And so to me that moment, that consequential moment that Paul Ryan has really, I do events occasionally with Paul Ryan, so he's gotten to be a friend. He hasn't endorsed Trump, hasn't said who he's going to vote for, probably will never say who's going to vote for. And by the way, his vote in Wisconsin will matter. But he's waiting for the wave to crash. He's waiting for the tsunami to just leave a damaged Republican Party and then resurrect a conservative, fiscally conservative, pro-trade, all going back to all of the kind of bedrocks of Republican conservative philosophy and policy, that comes back. But what's happened now is all of that's been hijacked by this weird mix of MAGA along with 2025, that Project 2025,
yes. Yep.
Which Trump, I don't know that he ever reads anything. I think he gets some tweet and then thinks he knows what it says. Yeah. And so initially he was, yeah, we're in it. Now he's like, no, we're not.
No.
Yeah, that's not me. And so, I think it's really hard to hybrid traditional conservatism with MAGA. And it'll be interesting to see how that happens because Trump once said something I thought in 2016 that I thought would sink his campaign. He was on Squawk Box in the morning on he wasn't on, didn't have a video, but he was on the phone, and he said, I am going to restructure America's debt. Mm-hmm. And what he meant by that was he was going to offer 80 cents on the dollar for all the bonds, right?
Okay,
he was gonna, because he did it in his business.
Sure.
That's how he survived. He restructured his debt. He only paid people 80% of what he owed them. I mean, he's a horrible person to do business with. Mm-hmm. Doug Burgum even acknowledged that. And then he said, I am the king of debt. I am the king of debt. Meaning that's how I've lived my life.
Yes.
And he was right about that.
Yep.
Robbing from Peter to pay Paul. And I thought, well, surely, all you conservatives will, we can't have that. But the bottom line was they've been so willing to tolerate a message that they don't agree with for power.
Yes.
But what they should have discovered is that for 4 years, they didn't have any power. All they were puppets and pawns in Trump's advancement.
I want to spin this back to Governor Walz as we wrap things up for the next few minutes, Heidi. But Republicans are going to come at him. And whether the vice presidential choices make a difference on Election Day, who knows? I don't know that it will or it won't. But surely the Republicans are going to attack Governor Walz. We've already seen some of it. But it's going to be the George Floyd riots in downtown Minneapolis and how he handled that. It's going to be his statewide lockdowns during COVID, which I don't think anybody even thinks about anymore unless you're just a total weirdo that's thinking about that stuff 5 years ago. But that's going to be an attack. And the other one is going to be the Feeding Our Future
scandal,
fraud scandal in Minnesota that was under his administration, even though he didn't have anything directly to do with it. But those are going to be the three lines of attack on Governor Walz. How does he handle those? How does he answer those questions? How does he answer J.D. Vance in a debate?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think if I were him, if he thought that there were things that he would do differently during the riots, he should say that. He should say, we were in middle of a horrific event where someone was blatantly murdered by a peace officer in my state, and we were trying to figure out some way to unite people to avoid this. And we didn't want to. I mean, we were taking our lead from the local authorities. Should we have acted sooner? Maybe, but hindsight is 2020. And on the scandal, I would say, wait for the other shoe. You think that this feeding scandal is the only scandal involving PPP in America? Get over it.
Right.
I mean, that the whole program was set up under Trump to basically allow for graft and grift. And, I mean, we all share some responsibility in that. And I think, I think if the Republicans are smart, and I was on with somebody who thinks about this quite a bit. If the Republicans are smart, they will not spend a lot of time on Tim Walz. They haven't defined Kamala yet. And so, to the extent that they can damn her with association with some of what he did as governor, then they'll try and do it. But any day that they're taking the attention away, because most people out there, if they hear something about Tim Walz right now, you know what they're going to say?
Who's Tim Walz?
Yeah, that's right. Who are we talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, if they pay attention, like you and I do, they're going to know that she named him. The vast majority of people are going to go, oh, okay. They don't know who J.D. Vance is. And he's been around now for 2 weeks. So I think a big mistake for the Republicans would be to emphasize Tim Walz's record. I think you just say, fine, you're cut out of the same mold. She's liberal. She believes in sanctuary cities, blah, 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 blah. You're all the same and move on. Because if they spend too much time focusing on him, they will not be. I mean, you're a football guy. I mean, so you focus all of your attention on improving your offensive line, but if you don't have a quarterback who can pass and a receiver who can catch, big deal. Right. That's where the money shot is, right?
Sure.
And so Tim at this point is the offensive line, right? And she's the quarterback, and the attention goes to the quarterback.
Last question
for a football. That's for a football analogy. Thank you.
And by the way, if no, I'm not going to say. I was going to tell you on the air what I would say to anything in response to J.D. Vance. I would have a go-to line, but I won't tell it to you on the air. I'll tell you off the air. Has to do again with the couch. Last thing, I'll let you go. So, okay, there's all this euphoria around the Democratic Party right now, around Kamala Harris. Democrats are feeling pretty good about ourselves right now. What I don't feel good about is the swing state polls are not moving fast enough in my direction. I still see Donald Trump ahead by a couple points in Arizona, ahead by a couple points in Pennsylvania, ahead by a couple points in some polls in Wisconsin. Is it going to move anymore? That's what makes me nervous. Sure, Democrats have all the momentum, but Kamala Harris isn't ahead in any of these damn places.
Well, I think that's true, but you got to remember where she's bringing the ticket from. I mean, literally, I saw polls where Biden was down 5 to 7 points in swing states. And so there is a big bounce here, but it's a bounce off a much lower platform than they didn't start even, right? The Democrat Republican did not start even. And so now we're back to a play for those swing state voters, right? These races are even. Here's the good news for Democrats. Biden had invested heavily in ground game. When you look at 2024 or 2020, the Democrats did not do door-to-door. They did not do direct voter outreach because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be consistent. The Republicans went door-to-door and were able to, I think, build momentum from that. It's not going to happen again. There's a lot of investment in swing state ground game, whether that's in Wisconsin with Tammy or whether it is in Michigan with Elise Slotkin. These are important Senate races as well. And in all of these races that you're talking about in swing states, the Senate candidate was doing 5 to 7% better and actually winning.
Yes.
And so that's a good sign about what the potential is. But you got to get out there and you work it, and you got to find the votes where the votes are. And to me, if we can pick up an extra 10,000 votes in rural America, in Pennsylvania, if we can pick up an extra 10,000 in Michigan, an extra 6,000, 7,000 in Wisconsin, in rural America, guess what happens?
Democrats win.
Trump loses. Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah. So now we're back to strategic political engagement with investment. None of these races turn on a ad. Even though these ads cost so much money, they turn on direct voter-to-voter content and connection. And right now, the single most important two facts for Kamala is how much money she's raised from grassroots fundraising and how many volunteers have come to the race.
Okay. And I will tell you from experience, because I have a daughter who's 23 who was a little down on Joe Biden. But I talked to her the other day and I said, so what do you think? And she goes, this is all good, Dad. This is all good. Me and my friends are way more enthusiastic today than we were 2 weeks ago. And so she's like, she goes, Joe Biden, Dad, I know he was your guy. And he's been a good president, but it was just time for him to step aside.
I was with a group of students at the RNC, nonpartisan, and I said, I know you're all discouraged because you don't see anyone on this ticket that you think understands who the hell you are. These aren't just your grandpas; they could be your great grandpas, right? I mean, seriously. And so it's like, what do they know about my challenges and about my life experiences? And Trump fashioned the whole campaign by running as the young guy.
It's just
that didn't
amazing.
work out so well. Even though he wasn't, that didn't work out so well for him.
Right.
And so, this is far from over. I think that if you had to handicap it, I think it's a 50-50 race. I think it's more likely Kamala will win the popular vote. In fact, I would predict that.
Yeah.
But this has always been about the Electoral College, and it is about 3 states. I mean, you can lose Georgia and Arizona, but you can't lose Pennsylvania, which is why some people are disappointed it wasn't Josh Shapiro. But sure. Josh Shapiro's a good guy. He's going to be out there campaigning. He's going to be out there working as hard as he can because, his future is wrapped into it too. He's younger than these guys are.
Sure. Okay. I will let you go, Heidi. Thank you. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, not a problem. Interesting. I mean, honestly, did you ever think you would live in such an interesting time in politics? It went from this boring, nobody likes him, to just this explosion of fun. So for those of us who do this, in part for a living, it's been pretty fun. Knowing
though, glass half empty guy here, knowing though that a Trump win in November is just going to be an absolute black day upon American history. And the next 4 years would be something I would not be looking forward to. So got to keep the positivity up here.
Yep. Hang in there.
Okay. Thank you. Heidi
Heitkamp
on the McFeely Mess podcast. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. And we'll talk again next week.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to Inforum.com and search Mike McFeely